and welcome, yes, for today's session about the right to have a choice to live sustainably. That is also co-organized as part of the Climate Campaigners project. It's been a 4-year project that is going to end in a few months, and we're going to share some insights about it. I would like to share just a few words first about ECOLISE, which is the main organizer of today's event. We are the network of community-led initiatives on climate change and sustainability. 48 members in 17 European countries, coming from co-village movement, permaculture movement, coalition of municipalities, and other research and specialized organizations that are dedicated to community-led initiatives and to a more sustainable life. A little sharing about today's plan of activities. Well, we're already here on the introductions, and I will soon give the floor to our two guest speakers, Nina Klein, policy lead from ECOLISE, and Francesca Mingrone from the Center for International Environmental Law. We will have each of you will also have an opportunity to ask questions for each panelist and have a good exchange. We will also offer you a little reflection time and sharing time in small groups of breakout rooms. And we will come back again for a plenary to get some reflections from those intimate discussions in breakout rooms. And we'll also send you in 2 follow-up activities after this meeting, because this is also the point of this initiative, to tie up and create a collaboration perspective on a wider, bigger advocacy campaign that ECOLISE is spearheading. To give you a little bit of floor and to make sure that everybody is really here in the meeting, could you please, as an invitation, write in the chat your name, your country, and your organization or project that you're. Yes, thank you, Neha. That was very fast. I will move on to the next point of agenda after 5 messages on the chat. 3 to go. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Knessa. We have Finland here in Spain and Vienna. Senan brings with them two countries. Whatever. Thank you, Nina, too. That is lovely. So maybe you would have preferred a more innovative way to contribute and to share. So I have a little question to ask you. This is also an invitation to join this Mentimeter that will guide a bit our reflection for today. So here is the link in the chat. I will start with the first questions. Which part of your current life contributes to a sustainable lifestyle? Definitely food and lifestyle, the work and diet, definitely. Lorenzo, maybe you can elaborate on days and night. I don't really know what that means. Co-living for Paivi. I'm curious about what project of co-living that is. Maybe at the end of the meeting, we will have more contributions on the lifestyles. Thank you very much. Sustainability, good education, and community garden. Definitely. With that done, I would love to give the floor to you, Nina, for the next part of the presentation. which we will introduce, one of the flagship activities from ECOLISE that has led a lot of last year's activities to manifesto publications. Some of you were here at our November annual policy event that happened. Some of you have signed it, some of you are already content partners, and some of you totally discovered it today, which is great, which is okay too. That was also the point for today. I can share the slides.
Thank you. Sometimes it ends up in the different browser, and I have no clue why. So very welcome. Very happy to see you here. This is the session about the right to have a choice to live sustainably. And what sounds like a very, very clumsy title is the outcome of a 2-year process with around 900 people. Two years, 900 people, over 440 organizations who really discussed with each other what are transformative local development policies led by communities. So how should these local development policies look like? And we did this process to position community-led initiatives, that's eco-villages, transition network initiatives, so anything which is citizen-led, to the European Green Deal. So we kind of reached out from the very, very local to the very, very EU and tried to find connections. So the outcome of this 10 theses process, because it was 10 theses about these local development policies, which we all need, is this manifesto. And if you have a look at it, you can see that we launched the manifesto last year on the 7th of November with over 500 people present, which was much more than we thought. And there was Philippe Lambert, who is the head of the Greens in the European Parliament. And Philippe Lambert actually picked up on the key message number 2 of this manifesto, which is the right to have a choice to live sustainably. And it happens not very often that you get applause from an MEP, but Philippe Lambert actually said, this is it, this is the right approach, because it's about liberty and freedom. So it's not saying you have to do this. And it's also about the choice. So it says the right to have a choice. Whoever does not want to live sustainably, fine. But we're talking here, I guess, in this room, all about people who really want to live sustainably and why they can't. So that's the topic. And if we have a look at this key message, you will see that it is tied in with the first key message of the manifesto, is that community-led initiatives are laboratories for transformative social innovation. And that means that we're not saying social citizen-led initiatives will fix the world. But what we're saying is that community-led initiatives can act as catalyzers, as levers for social change. And if you remember, you probably don't, but the IPCC report of 2022, and we'll get to that, said that up to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions reductions can be achieved through lifestyle changes. So basically we say, hey, that's really good news. We're already doing something about that. So there is this potential of power. And the power is less in citizen-led initiatives doing all the work, but the power is in citizen-led initiatives being the lever, the catalyzers for social change. Because this is sinking in slowly. It's not enough to tweak a few buttons and talk about technology or sectors, industrial sectors only, but it's really about social change needed. The second message comes out of this then, because we have this collective action potential, and at the same time, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is we can't live sustainably even though we want to in the EU, and we demand the right to have a choice to live sustainably. And at the next slide, we'll see what this means. And I also invite all of us to just have a look at this manifesto. And I always call this assisted reading because it's very rare that we can read in peace and quiet. So I put into the chat a link also to the manifesto. And you can see here on the slides the IPCC quote of 2022. Which says, and if we read that attentively, then we'll see the IPCC, who are 2,500 scientists around who work for the UN, advising the UN on climate, on the climate crisis. So over 2,000 scientists say that lifestyle changes can lead to up to 40 to 70% greenhouse gas emissions. But the catch is they don't say this is up to citizens now to fix the world, but they say we need the right policies, infrastructure, and technology in place. So we need systemic change. And this is how it gets to be a round thing. Lifestyle changes need to be facilitated by systemic changes. So you have this tension at the heart of what we are doing with our manifesto. It's a productive tension between, what can we as individuals and as collectives do, and what has to change around us. And the message that the IPCC brings is that it needs to be transformative change. And that means we need to change everything, or as I like to say, we can change everything, which is great news. So it's a good news, and I invite you to follow the link that I just put into the chat and have a reading time on the key message number 1, which is support community-led initiatives as laboratories for transformative social innovation. And also the second key message, which is support the right to have a choice to live sustainably. And just for your information, these key messages are meant for EU, so European policymakers. So then not for your neighbor, they are for you, but just so that you understand where we're coming from and who are we talking to. Imagine you're talking to an EU policymaker who is involved in the European Green Deal, so doing laws and legislation to answer the planetary crisis. Abdul, do we have 5 minutes for this? Just silence and reading time. And I ask you to raise your thumb if you're done reading. Either in person like this, or you go to the reactions bar, which is on the Zoom below, and you look for a thumb. Maybe also for those who have understood the task, because Zoom is not very interactive, could you just give me a thumb if you understood what we're supposed to do? I understood it. Yay. A few thumbs. So reading time, especially key message 2, because that's what we would like to explore with you today with the help of Francesca.
In case you're not seeing all the hands, Nina, I counted already 7 people. It's 8 people. 9 people.
Yeah, perfect. So we now know that it takes 2.5 minutes to read one of these key messages, which is also interesting. Now we know the background that of this event today, and I'm very happy to be able to present Francesca Mingrone of the Center for International Environmental Law, so CIEL in short. Because Francesca, I hope, will shed some light on part of the key message too, which says the right to have a healthy environment. So there is a right to a healthy environment. And Francesca, as you work on an international level, on an international level with law, could you just let us know what is this right to have a healthy environment and where does it come from?
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting me. Maybe a few words about CIEL, my organization, and what we do. We work really at the forefront of climate change law and human rights law. We're trying to integrate them. I'm personally based in Geneva, where we have an office, and we interact a lot with human rights institutions to really make sure that whatever they do in really reinforcing states' obligations to protect fundamental rights, they do include the climate and more broadly the environmental dimension. And vice versa, when we engage in environmental fora like the UNFCCC, the Climate Convention at the UN level, we bring into this fora the human rights dimension so that environmental action is underpinned by strong human rights obligations and safeguards. And I'm happy to say more about what a human rights-based approach means. But going back to your question about the right to healthy environment, that's correct. As you were saying, at the UN level, the right to healthy environment was adopted back in 2021 and then reaffirmed by the General Assembly in 2022. Maybe to take a step back, because I understand that many of you work more at the European Union level. To give you a sense, the Human Rights Council is a body that is composed of 47 member states, representing different regions. And they do meet 3 times per year, discussing various themes around human rights protection across the globe. They look at country situations, but also thematic issues. And one of them is increasingly looking at climate change and environment and how they do interact and affect human rights. In 2008, the US Council has done a very important work in really recognizing that environmental degradation and disruption does affect fundamental rights, whether it's the right to life, the right to food, the right to health, civil and political rights. And at the same time, it has recognized the states also have obligations to put in place processes that are participatory and allow communities and citizens to really take part in decision-making that is related to climate change and the environment. And so in this context, after a long campaign that was led by various groups, some of us were based in Geneva, others were based in different countries, really pushed countries to finally adopt a resolution in October 2021 that recognized the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. It was a long journey also to get to the actual definition of the right and the actual adjectives that we used. but finally where we landed. And so having these 3 objectives, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, provides a bit of a broad understanding of what it means to have such a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So it's just not about biodiversity, about a stable climate, but it can also relate to living in a world free of toxic or chemicals that harm the health of humans. So really having this holistic approach. The 2021 resolution was a very important step because it was the first time at the international level, not just regional, but really global, that this right was recognized. But the council has only 47 members. And so what we did is we tried to elevate even more the campaign and go to the General Assembly that gathers almost all the countries in the world. And there, finally, the year after, so that was July 2022, the General Assembly passed a resolution that again recognized the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So we can now say that the international community has recognized that this right exists. The question is, what's next? The resolution is not binding per se, but definitely it can influence the way in which law is understood at different levels and different jurisdictions, and can provide an incentives to state to also pass national, regional policies and laws that integrate this right. If we look, for instance, at the International Court of Justice, there's a list in the United Nations charters that indicates which laws the court can look at. And there are also principles on international law. There are decisions by international bodies. And so definitely the recognition of this right can influence policymaking and the interpretation of human rights law, environmental law at different levels. You mentioned also the work that ECOLISE does in really working with different levels of community, from going from local to international. And that's, I think, the campaign that led to the adoption of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment was really the proof of how important it is to connect different levels of policies, because the people really at the forefront of the environmental crisis understand what's needed, what are the violations that are happening on the ground, what are the needs. But then you also need the interpreters in a way, so those organizations that can really elevate those asks, rephrase them in a language that is spoken by these complex international organizations, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's the European Union, and so try to get change. But then you have to do the other process. So once you get recognition at the international level, you need to go back to the ground and making sure that whatever has been decided at a higher level then also has an impact at a lower one, where actually real change can happen. And so the recognition of the right to healthy environment, and I'm happy to speak more about that, is really an engine, if you want, for really local, national, regional change. We see in different constitutions the right has been already recognized. More and more courts are now integrating the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment in their reasoning. We see many UN organizations, bodies to refer to this decision and this resolution. And so we see that we can connect all different policy levels in a way that can really bring about change.
So this is really very exciting, at least for me. Would you say that this right to have a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment is really a game changer, in that, you know, for now, many activists who act for and also demonstrate for clean, healthy, and sustainable environment get criminalized, like they're rather in a situation where they have to run and fight and resist? Would you say this is the game changer argument on a legal level?
It's definitely, a very important step forward. For it to really be a game changer, we need the right to be implemented. And that's, I'm also happy to speak more about one of the campaigns we're leading to have this right recognized in a binding way in the European region. But you make a very important point about criminalization. Once you establish that there is a right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, you also legitimize more those that are fighting for this right to be respected. And so it's not just about really fighting for a cleaner environment, which, well, here we all agree with, but then it can be seen as competing with other national interests, whether it's energy or international security. But once you recognize that this is really a human right, then the people fighting for it, they're fighting for something they are entitled to. And so that also increases the protection of these individuals and delegitimize the response of states that try actually to limit these protests. We can look, of course, at the European level. Unfortunately, we see more and more security laws that are targeting climate activists, and that's a very dangerous precedent. But we can also look at other jurisdictions. If you look in Latin America, for instance, there is a striking numbers of environmental defenders that are killed every year. If you really make the case that they're not just fighting for the environment in general, but they're really fighting for human rights, you also make a case for a stronger response from the international community to protect them, to keep perpetrators accountable. Mm-hmm. And maybe a point about participation, which is really connected to the second principle of your manifesto. And also now I think it's the number 4 also principle. Looking at the European region, there is a convention that not many know about. It's the Aarhus Convention on Environmental Democracy. And really, this is a very important tool that can be used and should be used more. The convention is not just European, it actually also includes Central European states. One African state has acceded recently, and it's a legally binding agreement. So really each member state of the EU has the obligation to respect it. And it really relates to environmental policy making. And it states that countries have an obligation to promote and ensure public participation every time a project, a policy, or initiative on the environment is being discussed and taken. And it shouldn't just be a box ticking exercise, but really putting in place systemic processes that allow for civil society to meaningfully engage and have their say, identifying which groups are going to be affected by these policies and making sure that they are represented in the process, but also making sure that there is adequate information flow from the policymakers to the population. And so again, making sure that there is transparent communication, that every document or information that is relevant also to provide opinions is available easily. And then if any violations of rights arise from such policies, there is the right of citizens to have access to judicial remedies. And so being able to go to court and claim their rights. And this is very important, not just at the national level, because again, towards the citizens, the Aarhus Convention stipulates that states have all of these procedural obligations, but also at the international level, because the Almaty guidelines that have been adopted under the Aarhus Convention specify that these obligations of public participation, access to information, access to justice apply also in international processes. And so I can definitely see how this can be relevant in the context of the EU Green Deal. If we see that the decisions that are taken are not being conducted in a participatory and transparent manner, there are judicial remedies that can be activated. And for that, really, I wanted to stress this convention, because not many know about it, but really can make a big difference. In the context of the climate change negotiations, we always remind states party to the Aarhus Convention that they also have to integrate civil society in their work, that when we go to international convention meetings, we have to be able to access the discussions, meet with negotiators, etc., really to ensure that our voices are going to be heard and can have an impact.
Thank you. This is really interesting. Abdul, my colleague Abdul, is already saying to people also here in the audience, if you have a question, please come in with your question. Because we have Francesca Mingrone here, and very happy to have you, and it's an extraordinary opportunity to just ask any questions you might always have had about international law. No, that was a joke. The question I have while the audience or our group here are thinking about their own question is, how then from this right to have a healthy, clean and sustainable environment, because the manifesto makes a jump, it makes a leap, and it says we need to have the right to have a choice to live a sustainable life. So how do you see this leap? Because it's a leap from saying the environment needs to be great to saying actually I need to have a choice to change my lifestyle and live within planetary boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is that it's really not, I would say, a choice, but it's really a necessity. You mentioned the IPCC. Different working groups have come out with reports. Last March, a summary for policymakers was adopted. That's also a very much more reader-friendly version of everything that has been decided. And some of the messages are really clear. Being within planetary boundaries is not just a choice that we make collectively, but it's really a necessity if we want civilization to continue as we know it, and possibly even better. On the need, maybe just to take a step back on the need for a human rights-based approach, the IPCC also makes it clear that human rights are needed for better climate action. I can read out an important phrase that they included, and they say adaptation and mitigation actions that prioritize equity, social justice, climate justice, rights-based approaches, and inclusivity lead to more sustainable outcomes, reduce trade-offs, support transformative change, and advance climate resilient development. So again, this is a text that has been adopted by the leading scientists of the world. And so science is clear that living a sustainable life is needed. We have to do that. And the burden, unfortunately, is on the state. But as individuals, we have the power to push and demand action to the state. And so recognizing the right to a healthy environment strengthens also, on the other side, the fact that states have obligations. And so again, it's not just a matter of wanting to live a sustainable life, but it's about having the right to demand to the state that they have to let us have a sustainable life. So really, I thinking through like normative and human rights lenses, it really also shifts the burden on the state, and also strengthen the dimension of our claim. And it's not just our choice, but it's our right that we are entitled to demand that it be protected.
Thank you, Francesca. And Abdul, do we have questions also from the audience? Or from
we have
the
actually
group?
several questions, so let's take them one by one. A question about ecocide. How do you include ecocide in policy making, or is it indirectly included?
So that's a very good question. Ecocide. So I personally don't work on ecocide, but I can speak briefly to it. When we talk about law, there are different branches of law. You have international law that regulates the obligations of states towards other states. You have human rights law that also regulates the obligations that states have towards their citizens and the humankind in general. And then you have also criminal law that also regulates the obligations that private citizens have towards other private citizens, so that they don't interfere too much in fundamental rights, but also that states have towards their citizens. And ecocide fall within the climate law sphere. And there are a lot of discussions about whether crimes that are quite big in scope against nature can be elevated to similar nature of crimes against humanity, for instance. And there are currently discussions on whether this can be done, and it's going to happen. And it would be very interesting to see how it's gonna happen, because on one hand, it would reinforce the need for environmental protection, but also will introduce individual responsibility. If you think about CEOs, decision makers in big companies that are responsible of fossil fuel extraction, big accidents that really have the impact of destroying entire ecosystems. If you introduce criminal liability there by recognizing the crime of ecocide, you can strengthen even more. And a similar attempt is being done, not necessarily using the crime of ecocide, but trying to make the case that, again, those that take decisions and have the final say in the policy and actions of big multinational companies actually should not be shielded when liability is involved, but actually they should be personally accountable. And shifting this actually would also scare them and make them think twice when taking decisions that put profits above the interests of populations and ecosystems.
This is wonderful. Plus, I saw your question from Peter, which I was going to ask literally. What about the right of nature in law, granting a personhood in law, or a moral identity, moral frame of nature?
Here we're really at the boundaries of international law. It's really how to push the boundaries of the law as we have set it. I personally believe in the evolution of law, and in Latin America, we see a growing number of cases where courts have recognized rights of rivers, for instance, of forests. Of course, these open up a whole new problem of, for instance, representation. If we say that specific body of nature have rights, then who's gonna represent them? How do we identify their rights and their needs, and how we represent them before courts? There are a lot of question marks, and unfortunately, I don't see at least the European judicial system ready yet to embrace this approach. But this is definitely something that we should look at our neighbors across the ocean in Latin America to see how they are approaching these questions, because historically they've been really much more open to creative interpretations. And once again, I think this is a direction we're headed towards. The question, unfortunately, is how quickly do we get there? Before the European Court of Human Rights, we have currently 3 cases that relate to climate change. And still, there's a lot of work even to convince the court that states have an obligation to reduce emissions, because otherwise they will hinder traditionally recognized rights like right to life, right to privacy, right to family, and so on. So taking the step forward and saying that also forests, rivers, the sea have rights. It's maybe a bit early, at least in the European context, but that shouldn't prevent us for at least making arguments to start pushing. And in that, I'm sure there's a lot of work that can be done with members of the European Parliament, because they can bring this more creative side, also trying to pass resolutions and at least have a conversation about how the law can be interpreted and can evolve.
I will invite the next 2 questions for the participant to ask it directly. So maybe Laurence Modrego, I can give you the hand, and then Steve Charter, and then Reza.
Thank you, Abdul. Thank you so much, Francesca. This is such an interesting presentation you're making. It's giving lots of food for thought for our work at EU level. my question is just maybe for you to elaborate on what you said on the fact that it is not legally binding, that resolution. However, it gets referred to more and more, and I don't remember whether you said in legal text or in court decisions. And I'd like to understand from a legal point of view, how does that work? How is it non-binding, but still it gets mentioned in legal texts? What's the legal power of this?
Absolutely. So international law, it's a bit more nuanced than hard European law or national law. So you have international conventions that are binding, and so in principle states have to apply them. Some of them can be directly applicable on the national legal system. Some of them must be included specifically through ad hoc legislation in the legal system, but nonetheless, they can be used as tools to really fight specific policies or conducts of states. Then there is another body of instruments that are not binding per se, but they still have an authoritative nature. What does it mean? It means that they can, first of all, influence state conduct, but they can also be used as an interpretative tool when we look at specific obligations. For instance, there is the Convention on the Rights of the Child that is binding. States that have ratified it have an obligation to implement the convention at the national level, recognize specific rights of children, for instance, the right to life. The convention as such does not recognize the right to healthy environment or does not mention the environment. But since the resolution on the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment was passed, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, that is the body that oversees the implementation of the convention, has adopted a general comment on the environment. And this general comment explains how to interpret, in light of more recent developments, the convention. And something they say is that the right to healthy environment, although it's not recognized explicitly in the convention, underpins the whole convention. And so saying that means that now states, if they want to be compliant with the convention, which is binding, they also have to integrate the environmental dimension. Because otherwise, if they don't take action on the environment, they are undermining children's rights, and thus they are not respecting their own obligations. So I would say this is how non-legally binding instruments per se can actually have a binding indirect effect. That's why also maybe that's also a cue for me to talk about the campaign that we're leading at the Council of Europe level. So of course, the Council of Europe is separate from the European Union, but of course, it does include all the member states of the European Union, plus other Central Asian states. And really, it's the leading international organizations that deals with the human rights framework of the European region. So that's very important. And the European Charter of Human Rights is binding. So once again, European states have the obligation to protect their rights protected there. Unfortunately, there are no environmental rights included in the convention. This is also a result of the times when the convention was ratified and drafted. But now there is a campaign that we are leading to have the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment recognized by a protocol. So if the Council of Europe manages to adopt a new protocol, that would be binding. And so again, states would then have the obligation to recognize this right at the national level. And very concretely, citizens would have a new tool to go to court and claim this right. Because now, and this is something that we're seeing, that's also what I was mentioning before, we see attempts to go to human rights courts, such as the European Court of Human Rights, for states' inaction on climate change. But it's hard to make a case because you have to first you have to demonstrate that the state is not taking concrete action that is not in line with what science tells us. So that's the first thing you have to prove. Then you have to make the case that the lack of action is undermining the rights that are protected by the Charter. But since we don't have environmental rights, you have to make the case that climate change is undermining the right to life, the right to family life, and so on. But if the the Council of Europe recognized the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, you could much more easily make the link between climate inaction or environmental inaction more broadly and violation of the right to a clean environment. So you see, it would be much easier to make a case and get hopefully decisions by the court that really push states to take meaningful action.
Lovely. I pass it on to Steve.
Hi, thank you very much. Very helpful information. I was wondering if you could say something about the potential, whether this is current or future, for class actions relating to these rights as a balance between individual and collective rights.
Yes, I don't know about the procedural requirements for class actions. What I can say is that, of course, if you bring about a class action case, you need to prove that you also bear a collective interest. So I think in this sense, recognizing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment will strengthen this point, because of course it's an individual right. Each individual could say that they have the right to a clean environment, but it's also a collective right as such. And so I would imagine that that really strengthened the case. There have been attempts also in the past by groups to really bring forward cases before courts against states not taking enough action. But often the problem was that they were not able maybe to prove that they were representing a collective interest. While I would imagine that if the Council of Europe, since we're looking at the European context, were to adopt a protocol that is binding, it would be much easier to bring about class action on states in action for environmental disruption.
Thank you. It seems to bridge between point 1 and point 2, so the community-led initiatives.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Reza, would you like to share your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's more of a comment really than a question, and that is in these circles, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. It's very important. We need more of these things in this messed up world. The problem of EMF pollution, high frequency electromagnetic radiation, which is emitted from cell towers, cell masts, mobile phones, microwave ovens, smart devices. This is a very important problem which is often ignored, even in the most ecologically minded circles, because they're just not educated enough about it. And there is this notion that low carbon emissions, we can go more in this direction when we have more use of wireless devices and so on and so on. But this is an illusion, really. So I want to just put this out there that we need to care about this subject, because the biological safe and healthy level of EMF exposure is at times thousands or hundreds of times lower than what the industry says is safe, because all of the current standards based on United Nations bodies of work the standards are all based on thermal heating. How much does the radiation heat your tissues? And the biological safety is far lower. I'll put in the chat a documentary video on this topic that I did in case you were interested. But I just wanted to put this out there, something to keep in mind. That's all.
Thank you, Reza. And if I can also pick up the question from Liliane of how can we blend the health issues that children are having from a lack of policies, be it environmental or, as you mentioned, Reza, about other type of technological impact. because they're not allowed to have a healthy lifestyle or an alternative lifestyle. That's also something that is needed. Thank you, Lilian, for your question, for this comment as well.
Thank you. No, both are very relevant comments and questions. I'm not an expert about the frequency and the impacts of these technologies, but what I can say is that in our work, what we do is not just focusing on the impacts of climate or environmental degradation on rights, but also on the human rights impacts that some of the solutions that are put forward can have. So even if you think about energy transition, we might put in place measures that actually reduce emissions, but then they might come at a cost for communities involved. We can think of the hydroelectric dams, for instance. On principle, they are clean because they allow to reduce emissions. But if you think that they come at a cost of ecosystem destruction and relocation of communities, you always have to balance these things and really ensure that whatever is put in place to address environmental degradation does not further undermine human rights. And on children's rights, sorry, Reza, you want to come in on that?
If you don't mind, just on that note, your point is very well taken. It's really a human rights issue. Yes, we have a right to live in a sustainable environment. We also have a right to live in our own homes and not have it radiated from outside by genotoxic radiation. And that's completely ignored. Because, you know, if there's a smoker outside, you can close your windows. But when they put a cell tower outside your window, it comes through. You know, you can try to block your home, but that's very expensive and complicated. And also in terms of experimentation, because, for example, on this 5G technology or even 4G, there's not even one study that shows safety. You know, so we're being used as an experiment, which is contrary to you know, laws and treaties.
I see a lot of nodding when you're sharing, Reza. Thank you. And I think we could also extrapolate with waves. It can be also with pollution, with water pollution around, which you cannot do anything if it's next to you. This is the water. I forgot there was a question from Senan. Senan, would you like to, or Senan? Yes.
Hi, Senan, you got it right. Hi. Hi, my name is Senan. I was just curious about the idea around, maybe it's more of an access right, but the idea around the right to restore, because being someone who lives in Europe, I've lived in Ireland and Germany for most of my life. There's a lot of degraded natural areas, and one of, having studied ecology originally as my degree, one of the areas we kept on coming back to is we're in ecological debt, and we're going to have to be able eventually to restore a lot of areas. I mean, I know in a lot of European countries, over 70% of the waterways, for example, are degraded. And so the idea of restoration of natural areas and rights, I'd be curious if there's any overlap there, because I know in the European Green New Deal, there is a lot of push now, and restoration is finally getting a bit of momentum behind it. So I'd just be curious if there's any sort of overlap there or anything like that if you've heard of.
Thank you. I don't work on that, but definitely can see how one can make human rights arguments on the need to restore areas, because restoration is also part of the solution to combat environmental degradation. And if you also live in ecologically dead areas, that has an impact on ecosystems, on health, also as Reza was saying. And so if you want to protect your right to health, your right ultimately to life, your right to food, if we think of those that actually whose livelihood depend on agriculture, for instance, the only way that you can actually uphold all these rights is through ecological restoration. So once again, I can really see how one can make human rights argument using the existing rights, and hopefully the right to healthy environment, if this is also recognized at the European level, to really make a strong case for restoration to be one of the initiatives and approaches as part of the Green Deal.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think that was an excellent round of questions, which shows the interest in this rights and human rights-based approach. And thank you so much, Francesca, for your inputs, and to the group here for your interest. And I suggest Abdul to take this further, because you also represent the Global Eco Village Network Europe, plus a project which is called Campaigners, which is about, we saw the IPCC quote, 40 to 70% greenhouse gas emissions reductions to the right policies, infrastructure, and technologies in place. And campaigners, Abdul, kind of tried to find out where are these fine lines between the individual behavior change and the systemic changes needed.
Thank you, Nina. Yes, we'll do maybe a 15-minute shorter presentation on campaigners, because it was very fruitful, and I'm happy that it was with Francesca. So yes, Campaigner is a project that aims to promote transition to sustainable lifestyle through behavioral change among citizens. So we're not trying to affect the industry, the infrastructure, but behavior on the citizen level. And how we did that is also thanks to 14 network of cities. Maybe you're living in one of those, like for the list here, that are actively present and engaging with their citizen with the materials of the project. We have a mobile app that I will share a little bit around, and different events to encourage changes of behavior, nudging, let's say, nudging. I'm gonna go fast on this one. So first, let's define it. It's a lifestyle that will minimize environmental degradation, that would be more sustainable than the wasteful, highly emittive, highly use of natural resources that it has, and at the same time, sustaining a social and economical environment that's around you. That's why we were really keen on having cities piloting this behavior, because then the environment becomes healthy, the social economic fabric becomes healthy, and then the quality of life becomes better for everybody, without leaving anybody behind. I'm going to look a little bit beyond for this. We were asking our question, how critical would that be? How impactful would that be? And what impact it would have. And it has a big impact, because 2/3 of the emissions of pollution comes from an individual and household consumption, with the whole chain included. It doesn't mean that us as individual, we directly generate everything, but the lifestyle, the consumption, the production, the travel, the holidays, that's, we have an effect on it. We have a nudge on it. Because most of it are not really intentional. It is due to the choices that we have, to the system that we have. How is it designed? So therefore, by making it, our aim was by making it accessible, affordable, maybe that option would be more used, more affected. And we did different surveys to try to see how people would respond to that, and to a lifestyle change. And the top 3 challenges I would like to share with them, because there are those barriers. First is cost of living. And keep in mind that we asked this question even before the energy crisis. It was 4 years ago. So already there, it was the cost of living. The second challenge is climate change. Ironically, climate change would generate other behaviors that will influence more climate change. Think of air conditioning or extra heating, or the impact of flooding. So ironically, it's gonna generate it a little bit more. Finally, it's about income inequality. Income inequality, because if there's no social justice on, or equitable share on the lifestyle changes, why would I make an effort when I have any millionaire that can take their jet on a weekly basis or daily basis, when I am asked to take always the public transport? So this inequality will create a tension on the collective share that we can do for those lifestyles. Moving on a little bit on it. So what did we do? We identified 57 lifestyle challenges in different domains, and we offered them to the citizen, and analyzed how it would be affected by different criteria of appreciation. And I'm sad to say that age was the most significant impactful factor on our survey, being that the older the citizen, the less likely they were to change or adopt a different lifestyle. They say that habits are tough to change at this point, with the exception of heating, where geography is obviously the biggest factor. We have also found some cultural indication specificities. Americas and Africa have very low inclination toward different lifestyle because it's already embedded. Things to analyze a little bit more. And yes, other metrics which are good to highlight is the educational background has no impact. It is not a positive or a negative. So everybody, regardless of their educational background, resonate to the same way to these challenges. And the occupational status, meaning do you have an active professional activity or not? Having a work activities has a positive influence compared to being unemployed. So that's also speak to the opportunity that is being given. I wanted to give you a bit of an example of what do we do actually. What is the challenge that we give? So at the beginning we ask you for your current lifestyle, and then we give you another a nudge towards a more sustainable lifestyle that you can decide to live up to. Do you accept or reject? And if you accomplish it, you let us know, and you measure yourself on an individual level. What did you avoid in terms of climate impact, and what did you benefit for yourself or for your community or your direct municipality? And we have really different 57 of those challenges to figure them out. And so I also invite you to download the Climate Campaigners app, because then when you do those challenges and more people from your city do that, we can have some data and aggregation and take a look. Okay, this city has implemented this and these challenges, and therefore this has been the positive impact. For now, only the carbon footprint, but it's already a good indicator of how much was saved here and there. So quite a positive outlook on individual behavior. And just to give you, for instance, you might ask me, what is really the effect and what is the potential of it? So I have here maybe a little bit more scientific document to give a bit of projection of what would happen. So let's say if we change nothing, so a base, what would happen if we would adopt a low or high change of lifestyle compared to only doing a decarbonating mission. When I talk about decarbonating mission, it's the decarb scenario. If we take all the measures to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. So if we do only that, it's already quite positive. But I would like to highlight is that you can really see that if we adopt a few lifestyle changes, you can really see it here by 2030, especially high lifestyle changes, we can achieve much more if we also encourage for individual lifestyle. We can achieve much more. We literally double just a decarbonated scenario by 2030. And on the climate change basis, the faster we change things, the more we reduce this depth of CO2 or footprint, the better it's going to be for the next few decades. So it does have an effect. It does have an effect. It cannot be only on industrial systemic level. Lifestyles really matters, and some of the cities have adopted it. We have all of the cities that have tried it out and to engage their citizens, so it can also be a way to generate activities and connection within the municipality. Voila, so I hope I motivated you to download the app and give it a try and try a few challenges of your own. What I can share as a conclusion here, we have a bit of time, is some cities have also implemented very neat incentives, reward system that are locally based. If I achieve 5 challenges, I would get a discount for the museum or a t-shirt with the name of my city or a free bus ticket. And I think those gamification, nudges, inspiration have also their place. It cannot only be on the punitive side or the guilt processing side. Yes, climate change is happening. It's even more on the climate adaptation side. We can also twist it in a funny way, a collaborative way of how we can adapt and deal with it. At least that's a complementary perspective to the awareness work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. That was really interesting and I think very, very fitting. And there is a handbook of the Campaigners Project as well, and we can send the link in the chat. As an energy person, I sense the need to, after this long presentation mode, just to take a bit of a break maybe and have a 5-minute break. I don't know what you think about that, Abdul, and we can do stretching together, or you just switch off your camera and you look at something green, which you might have in front of your window. And I vowed to myself that I wouldn't sit on a chair for 2 hours on end, so I'm not going to do it. and it's just an invitation. You can switch off your camera or do silly things with us with the camera open and just stretch. Getting up is really important in between, and we can let the body just move, and maybe you can hear Abdul's music. Feel what your body wants to do right now. I'm sure it's not sitting, it's not staring at the screen, even though it's amazingly interesting. And when you move, you can also start to see where your breathing is. So how is your breath doing right now? And you can continue to move. Just pay attention to your breathing. Is it fast, or is it getting slower maybe with your movements? But just pay attention to what your breathing is doing. Being confronted with a virtual group and so much information. And then if you want to, we can slowly come back. Standing is actually a really good idea in these events, so I'm just gonna see if I can stand. And then that's the energizer. Thank you, Abdul. And maybe we can also start a little discussion with questions to Abdul on this Campaigners project, which really got us thinking about the role of cities, because their citizens said, hey, I want to go to work by bike, but I can't because I will be killed if I live in Brussels. So it's just this role of cities in this choice to have a sustainable life. And Abdul, what is the answer of cities? Do they say, yeah, sure, we got feedback and now we're going to fix the problem? Or what can cities do?
Yes, so now I will speak in the name of another city, the city of Milano, of what they do. They're really trying to be in contact with their citizen with various initiatives. There is one that really struck me. It's how to reclaim spaces. So you would have citizen that would be living in a neighborhood, and they would say, here we would love a lovely park or more space to just sit. Right now it's a parking, or it's a garbage storage. How about we redesign it? And so the municipality doesn't come and say, okay, we're going to redesign it. They say, okay, let's design it together. And so it's those neighboring people that needs also, I think it's quite smart on a political level, because it's not the mayor that risks to not be reelected. It's more the citizen that come and knock at every door and try to engage. Hey, we would like to do that. What do you think? And starting that. And the redesigned spaces are family friendly, bike friendly, sitting friendly, with benches and trees to do that. And if you'd see the before and after, yeah, that's quite impressive. And sometimes it's not even an infrastructure redesign. They would use, ephemeral paint on the flooring and ephemeral benches to put temporarily just to test. How is it now if I reclaim it, if I move it? How is it if now I close this road for car entries and automatically it becomes pedestrian areas as such? So I love this way of reclaiming and having a choice of how my neighborhood can look on an urban area. It's not only people in rural area that could just have fun and redesign their spaces.
And maybe while people in the virtual group are thinking about the questions towards Abdul and the Campaigners project, which will have its final conference in March. So there is a handbook, there is materials on the website. But my question would be to Francesca. You just heard about the role of cities and citizens. Like, how does this fit? You said before that this UN level needs to connect with the local level. What do you think when you hear something like that?
It's wonderful because I think that they have a role to play also in nudging the higher state to take action. We see, for instance, resolutions passed at the municipality level, city level, region level, that then can, as a bottom-up approach, push and increase pressure on states. And so maybe something I could suggest, if some of you work at this like more local level, get them to issue also official decisions, resolution. I live in Switzerland, which is not the EU, but for instance, different cantons have their own constitutions. And so we see a lot of initiatives of getting in the very local constitutions some rights, and then that can be elevated. So really don't discard these lower levels just because maybe they have a smaller outreach or smaller power, because actually they can definitely influence national policy making.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's this binding together, which is also the manifesto's goal, to bind the very, very local, so citizen-led initiatives, and in the manifesto case, the Green Deal, but just to get the sap rising and the juices flowing in this policy relationship. Are there any other questions in the room too about the Campaigners and Lifestyle project and what Abdul just presented? Did we have something in the chat? Then I would actually be really, really interested in also for the group here to get to know each other in breakout rooms, and for us to explore together the right to have a choice to live sustainably. Because what ECOLISE is trying to do with the manifesto, with this key message number 2, is to have a storytelling action. So our campaign will be about storytelling and triggering deep conversations. And we envisage our campaign partners to come and tell their own stories about key message 1, which is, hey, why are we so powerful as citizen-led initiatives? Why do we need more of these energy cooperatives, community-supported agriculture? And key message 2 is like, why are we a bit in a straight, or not a bit actually, why are we in a straitjacket now when it comes to the right to have a choice to live sustainably? Because if you read the first key message, it says that eco-villages are growing their own sustainable food and trying really their best to be living sustainably can't, because the system is such that as soon as you, for example, make use of public services, which is one example, or you have to go to a hospital, you enter a system where you don't have a say in, but you partake in its emissions, and that already can get you out of the planetary boundaries. So we're interested in finding out, what's your take on the discussion today? So what's hindering your access to a sustainable lifestyle? but also how do you react to this human rights-based approach that Francesca presented? Some people, when we did the manifesto, they were like, "Oh, that sounds a bit pompous. You don't need to have the right to everything." So what's your reaction now? And also what you think about the human rights approach. So what does this mean? Because we use the word a lot, human right, but Francesca also said it's a right on UN level, but strangely enough, it's not binding. So what is this human right approach? What does it mean for us? And these are just suggestions of questions. And what we really want is to get you going in discussions around the key message 2 of the manifesto and play with it. So the suggestion, Abdul, is for us to break out. No, break up in breakout rooms.
All right, here we go. I've pasted the questions in the chat, and see you very soon. You will have 20 minutes. You'll be 5 per group, so maybe 4 minutes per person. See you very soon. Yeah, we have one theme around living, co-housing, living in eco-village, definitely. We have mobility, no flying or using bikes and selling the car once for all. Food, grow the food in the city, grow your own food, have a local food system, definitely. Nature is also present with nature restoration, or develop a permaculture, I guess a permaculture farm, or definitely. Sustainable fashion, we haven't talked about clothing yet, clothing and consumption. Yes, working on my purpose. That would be also a very radical sustainable lifestyle, working on the purpose. Thank you very much for sharing and for this reflection. I would like to invite Nina now for the closing words of today, and I will start sharing the slides too.
Yeah, I want to thank you all, and especially Francesca, for sharing your knowledge with us. And I think the feedback was such that you hopefully felt, Francesca, that there was a lot of interest. I guess that's what you always feel when you speak. So yes, exactly, a round of applause. Thank you, and also for the wonderful, informed and interested questions. I had really the impression of being in a room full of people who understand legal stuff, which I don't. So amazing. And I would just like to point out that my colleague Laurence, who is in the room with us, and I will have an event next Monday where we will present the storytelling aspects of the campaign that we're planning together with partners around the time for Collective Action Manifesto. And that's just an invitation for you to join the meeting next Monday from 5 to 6:30. And as I said in the breakout room, the campaign will be based on storytelling. So based on each of us telling our own stories of why do we need the right to have a choice to live sustainably, and why is citizen-led collective action so important? So why do we need a strong European Green Deal for communities to thrive? We'll work with an expert, a storytelling trainer. We'll work with our campaign partners. So everybody's invited invited to join next week's event because it's for potential and existing partners. So if you're just interested, stop by and have a look. And also, I would like to point out again, CIEL, Francesca, is doing a campaign as well, and I posted this earlier. Maybe Francesca, you could maybe post a link or something in the chat, or I'll just repost it, and we'll have a follow-up email to all of you, so you can find the chat links, the slides, and the recording, and we can follow up like that. And that is it already. I invite also Abdul to take the word, and Francesca, maybe just for the checkout, so that we can close this meeting with a feeling full of energy.
Please, Francesca.
No, thank you so much. I always find it incredibly interesting to have these meetings with people with different perspectives, also working in different fora, really to pierce different bubbles. And I think we should do this exercise more. We never have enough time, so I'm happy also to put my email address in the chat. And Nina, I'll share with you some resources in case you want to circulate that by email. So definitely it's a conversation to be continued, and if there's anything we can do on our side to support your own campaigns, let us know. And really thank you so much. Even if we have a screen that separates us all, I really felt as if we were in the same room, so really appreciate it.
Thank you, Francesca. I would like to invite everyone to activate their camera. I can also stop the recording. This can be